1895. A steel boss built an entire town from scratch and then sold it street by street to his own workers. The newspapers called it a worker's paradise. It was also a weapon. Let's go back and see it. It's the early 1900s and you're walking down the main street of Vandergrift, Pennsylvania, a town that didn't exist 10 years ago where nobody rents. And this is a real photograph. Same street, the same brick storefronts a steel magnate laid out before he sold a single lot. But this picture wasn't taken in 1902. It was taken more than a century later because this town is still here. Smaller, quieter, half its people gone. The question is what happened in between and why the most generous thing a steel boss ever did for his workers started with him crushing their strike. To understand Vandergrift, you have to start 4 miles upriver in a town called Apollo. George McMurtry ran the Apollo Iron and Steel Company, galvanized steel, good business, growing fast. But in 1893, his workers walked out. The strike turned into a lockout and the lockout turned bitter. McMurtry didn't negotiate. He brought in replacement workers from the surrounding countryside, trained them from scratch, and broke the union at his own gates. He won. And then he did something almost no industrialist of his era did after winning. He sat down and thought about why the fight had happened at all. His answer wasn't higher wages. His answer was real estate. In 1895, McMurtry bought a 650-acre farm on a bend of the Kiskimitas River, about 40 miles from Pittsburgh. Then he hired the most famous landscape architecture firm in America, the Olmsteds, the family behind New York's Central Park and the grounds of the Chicago World's Fair. The old man, Frederick Law Olmsted, was nearly retired, so his stepson John Charles Olmsted took the job. McMurtry's brief was 5 words long, something better than the best, and the plan they drew was genuinely radical for its time. Curved streets that followed the hillside instead of fighting it, a greenbelt, parklets, the mill down on the flats by the river, the houses up on the high ground above the smoke. Before a single lot went on sale, the company paved the streets, laid the sidewalks, ran the water lines, dug the sewers, and switched on the street lights. In 1895, there were American cities that had none of that. This brand new town in the middle of farmland had all of it first. And then came the part that made Vandergrift famous. McMurtry didn't rent these houses to his workers the way every other company town in America did. He sold them the lots. Own your home, own your yard, own a piece of the town. The National Park Service today calls it the first successful planned industrial town actually sold to its workers. It sounds like generosity. It was also arithmetic. A renter can walk out on strike and lose nothing. A homeowner with a mortgage, a garden, and a front porch on a paved street, that man thinks twice. McMurtry had watched Homestead burn a few years earlier and fought his own war in Apollo, and he had drawn a cold, brilliant conclusion. You don't defeat a union with guards and fences. You defeat it with equity. The workers he invited to buy in were overwhelmingly the loyal men, including the very replacements who had crossed the line in Apollo. The town was a filter, and ownership was the filtration. Here's the uncomfortable part for anyone who wants this story to be simple. It worked for everyone for decades. In 1901, the mill became part of U.S. Steel's empire, run under its sheet steel subsidiaries, and it kept growing until it was reported at the time to be the largest sheet steel rolling operation in the world. The town grew with it. A theater, the Casino, opened on Grant Avenue in 1900, and it's still the region's oldest theater in operation. By 1940, 10,725 people lived in Vandergrift. Skilled steelworkers owned their homes outright, sent their kids to good schools, and walked to work on streets an Olmsted had drawn. Strikes stayed rare. Whatever you think of why McMurtry built this place, the people who lived here weren't pretending. For half a century, this really was something better than the best. What broke Vandergrift wasn't a scandal and it wasn't a villain. It was the same slow tide that came for every steel valley in Pennsylvania, cheaper steel from overseas, mills consolidating, automating, shrinking. Through the 70s and 80s, the paychecks got thinner and the young people started leaving, not all at once, just steadily, one moving truck at a time. The casino theater went dark in 1981. In 1988, U.S. Steel's old works passed to Allegheny Ludlam, a specialty steel maker, a smaller operation for a smaller era. The storefronts on Grant Avenue emptied out one by one. By the 2020 census, 5,068 people were left, less than half of what this town was in 1940. The houses the workers bought are still standing. There just aren't enough workers left to fill them. But here's what makes Vandergrift different from the ghost towns in this series. The mill never stopped. Under a TI, the old works still rolls specialty steel today, on the same flats by the river where McMurtry put it in 1895. And up on Grant Avenue, volunteers spent 30 years bringing the casino theater back to life. It reopened in 1995, 100 years after the town itself was born, and the whole downtown is now a National Register Historic District. The Utopia didn't vanish. It just outlived the world that needed it. A town invented to end a labor war is now kept alive by volunteers who simply love the place, which might be the one outcome George McMurtry never planned for. If you know a town like this, a place built for one perfect purpose that quietly outlived it, tell me in the comments. That's where the next story comes from. I'm Vanishing Era.